Well, thank you for tuning in. On today's episode of Prison Bosses, we're honored to welcome Troy Alexander. We will take a dive into the mind of how a kid who started behind bars can turn into a journalist for Forbes, the New York Times, as well as Details. How he was able to travel the world and become a consultant to luxury brands like Bentley, Range Rover, Jaguar, and more, and how Troy ultimately became a successful entrepreneur, raising over $2.5 million for his skincare brand, Troy Skincare for Men. So, with that being said, I would love to introduce my brother, Troy Alexander. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Trent. I really, really appreciate it, and looking forward to a great talk.
Same here, bro. I'm sure our listeners are going to pick up on a lot of jewels today that you'll be able to share. And so, Troy, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, a little bit of your backstory.
Yeah, so I was born in Beaufort, South Carolina.
Mm,
Um, my mother married a really great man who became my father,
mm-hmm,
and he was in the military, and we traveled around the world in the country. And I grew up in the DMV.
mm,
My
mm.
dad was stationed at Quantico, and so around Quantico, Fredericksburg area. And
Gotcha.
so that's where I grew up. That's where I went to high school.
So growing up, you have your mom in the household. You have this great man who came into your lives, exposing you guys to more. What led you down to the road that ultimately, landed into incarceration?
I mean, I think, it was funny, when I was growing up, and God rest my father's soul, I met him when I was 5 years old.
Mm,
Exceptional man. I mean, exceptional man. I think what led me down the road of incarceration was my ego.
mm,
Um,
mm,
ego was the cause of,
mm,
of, of my demise.
mm,
And I remember growing up, when I was 16 years old, my dad used to always tell me, he was like, "You're going to go to jail one day. You're going to go to jail one day," right? He used to always say that because my dad was a very high official in the military. He was a Marine, and he understands people. He used to always
yep,
say,
yep.
son, you think you know the game, but you don't know the game.
Mm,
Always say that to me, right? And again, my ego and all the things, that's what led me to go to prison, my ego.
gotcha. And so, how old were you when you actually found yourself incarcerated?
Yeah, so I was 21, 22.
Mm, mm.
Two.
So now, did you go to college? Assuming you got your high school diploma,
Yeah.
what was that like leading up to 22?
Yeah, I would say I got my high school diploma, was in college, that kind of stopped, kind of altered everything.
Mm,
Um, Got in a fight, changed the trajectory of
mm,
my life. Um,
mm.
Again, it was ego based. I was a young, dumb, as I say, full of cum, stupid man.
Like many of us, right?
My ego caused that, but I realized that going through that situation was the greatest thing that happened to me. I mean,
Mm,
literally the
mm,
greatest thing that happened to me because
yep,
when I was in there were so many blessings that transpired, from the correctional officer saying, you don't belong here, and just people just talking, right?
mm,
And
mm,
I always knew that with no disrespect, I put myself there, but I didn't belong there. But
mm.
it was the greatest thing that happened to me because I grew up and became a man first and
That's right.
foremost.
That's
And I
right.
remember my cellmate told me something that was very profound. He said, "Young blood, the same men in here are the same men out there, just dressed up."
Mm. Powerful. That's powerful. It really is.
Yeah,
And you also mentioned something that I definitely won't want to skip over, but the uh the mention of positive talk. And not even just from yourself, but you mentioned from the CEOs.
correct.
And I think it's important to highlight, especially in wake of Robert Brooks and what we've recently seen take place, that we also highlight the importance of correctional officers and what they do in terms of a positive or negative approaches that they take and the effect that it has on us.
Correct.
And if you were being told every day that you were in there, you were a piece of shit and you deserve to be there, I could imagine that would also start to become some of your mindset. But having
Absolutely.
that positive impact, I'm sure it played a vital part. And so, for our listeners, I want you guys to understand the importance of surrounding yourselves around positivity, positive mindset, positive people, as well as positive talk to yourself, because it does play a big part of who you become.
Yeah, no, I mean, I forgot the CEO's name, but she was a woman. And the first time I walked through those bars, she said to me, she was like, "You know, you don't belong here. God has a purpose for you." She said that to me. I will
Mm,
never ever forget
mm,
that. And with all
mm.
due respect, again, my ego, I'm in this situation, I'm angry, upset, not understanding her words, but later on in life, I understood her words,
Yep,
right?
yep, yep.
And with all due respect, I didn't say this to the woman, but when I walked past her, I was like, "Who the fuck are you talking to?" You know what I mean? I'm stuck in here. What do you say to me? Right?
Right.
What do you say?
That's
But
real talk.
but that started the change in my life.
Mm, mm.
That
So
one woman,
that one woman while incarcerated. And
while
so,
incarcerated.
do you mind speaking on to some of the change that started to take place while you were in there? But keep it in mind that a big portion of our listeners are currently incarcerated right now. And I always like to emphasize that the change happens while they're in the institution. So speak to some of that.
Yeah, so I started to really kind of, and again, I'm not pushing my beliefs or anything on anyone, but I can only
Hmm.
share what worked for me.
That's right.
I started to pray. I
Hmm.
started to have a deeper connection with God, and I started to just sit and be by myself in my cell
Mm,
and just sit with myself,
mm.
remove myself from the distractions that are in there because there's tons of distractions in there, regardless if you're in.
Indeed. Yep.
And I started to really kind of pray, and I really started to work on myself. I started to journal.
Mm,
I started to write every day about what I was seeing, what I was doing, and that is something that kind of helped me. And I started to train my mind,
mm,
and I started to read the dictionary, right? Because I wanted to expand my vocabulary. I started to read the Bible because I wanted
mm,
to understand. And, one of my favorite verses, I still remember like it was yesterday, is Psalms 3, um 5 through 6, and it's trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, and all
understanding.
your ways acknowledge him and he will guide your paths, right?
That's right.
I
That's
repeated
right.
that over and over and over and over. Repetition is like Kobe
Mm,
Bryant used to say, he would shoot 10,000 free throws every day, and it's repetition.
yep.
And I started to journal, I started to read, I started to pray, and I started to distance myself from a lot of the chaos that was in there. And I really started to work on training my mind and that mental fortitude and that mental strength.
Mm.
And I started to write everything that I wanted to do in my life, no matter how crazy it was, no matter how I
Mhm.
wrote everything I wanted to do, like travel the world, have, no disrespect, but have sex with beautiful women, make money, do all those things. I wrote everything. I'm in prison, so I'm writing everything I want to do.
Yep.
And that's what I started to do. I started to focus on that. And I really started
Mm.
to focus on myself and understand who I am as a person because I can't leave. So I have no choice but to work on me. And
That's
that's
right.
what I started to do. And it was the greatest thing. And again, my
Hmm.
cellmates encouraging me, saying, "Hey, look, young blood, you have 2 years in here. You don't tell people you have 2 years. You tell them you have 33 years, right?" So I had
Hmm.
to learn the truth
Hmm.
and how to operate in that system,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And just having those people who were blessings to me that taught me how to navigate that world because I wasn't of that world.
Yep. And that's huge. I mean, I think that's absolutely huge. I think you said a lot of powerful stuff that correlates. Like, even from my end, whenever I talk to people about my experience, I always talk about the importance of reading. Before I came incarcerated, I never read a whole book in my life.
Wow.
But I sat down in there and like last year I read over 54 books. And so it just tells you the mindset shift, right? When you also talk about spirituality, I'm a firm believer that you can't call on your higher power only when things are going negative. You got to build a relationship. So that means daily conversations when good things are good, when things are bad, but also having the faith. And as we know, you only need the faith the size of a mustard seed. So it
Amen.
doesn't take much, you know? And so, and then I love the fact that you said distancing yourself. And you have to be able to separate yourself from the noise so that way you can kind of sit still, identify where you want to go, and doing so by removing all of the negative people, places, and things in our lives.
Yeah.
And so can you just speak to how you're able to distance yourself while incarcerated? It seems like a hard concept when you think in most people's minds is everyone's in there a criminal, so there's no positivity. But can you speak to that?
Yeah, you know again, I can share what worked for me. What I started to do was pray and just talk to God, right?
Mm,
And from
mm,
that perspective, I started to open my eyes because, again, what I shared with you earlier, my cellmate said, if you study the men in here, they're the same men out there just dressed up. So I
facts.
started to study the men, right? And who did I want to model myself behind?
Mm.
And a lot of the things I saw, I didn't want to model myself.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know, there was a time that I almost got a tattoo in there that said heartache and pain. And if I kept that badge on me, I still would be in heartache and pain.
Mm,
So I started to model myself and study people and observe, right? And just sit back and observe, not in no clique, not in anything, and just be by myself. And then I started to say again, who do I want to model myself after? And I learned that I didn't want to model myself after a lot of the things that I saw in there. And so I had no choice but to start making the change in myself
mm.
because I wanted to get out of that fucking situation as fast as I could, right? And get on with my life. And so I had to learn how to train myself. And no shade. I'm still a work in progress because
Right.
you know I like to tell people that in so many regards, in my opinion, you know, prison still gives men and women PTSD, you know,
Yes.
because the things that you've seen, the things that you've
Yes.
experienced, and all of those things, right? So I am constantly working on myself and I'm constantly working on my mind. I may be, you know, a little too extreme for some people because of what I saw and what I've done and seen,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, but I'm only here to be a vehicle, and my purpose in this earth is to inspire everyone. And so, to all the listeners,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what's going on in your life, you have a chance to do something great with your life,
Mm,
whether
mm,
incarcerated or not. You
mm.
have to decide what you want to do and you have to decide where you want to go. We
Preach.
all have one expiration date and we don't know when that's coming. And so we have to start taking the chances to change because I was just speaking at a prison in St. Louis, Missouri, Farmington Correctional Center. So I'm getting on the speaking circuit. So for all the listeners and you, if you know anyone who wants me to come and speak in your prison, I'm more than willing and helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But I share this with people. Nelson Mandela did 27 years in prison
Mm, mm,
and he became the president. It's
mm,
possible for all of us.
mm.
It's possible.
That's right.
And you have to hold on to that.
Yep.
When you think of anybody who's ever built anything, they've gone through trials and tribulations that we know nothing about.
Facts. Facts.
Learn to turn your story into triumph.
Yes.
You know,
Mm.
an actor who's a very successful actor was incarcerated, Tim Allen. You know, there's
Yep.
a lot of people who've been incarcerated, have turned their life around and done some extraordinary things. But
Yep.
we need to see more of that for men and women who are incarcerated to see and understand that that's possible.
I agree with you, bro. Yo, you said some power. I hope the listeners take a second and just rewind the clip back because he gave you a bunch of jewels in that little segment, and I hope it does not go over your head, and I hope you're able to extract it because everything he said is 100% right. And so, Troy, where were you actually locked up at?
So yeah, I was at James River Correctional Center
Mm-hmm.
um, in Virginia, like maybe
Virginia.
like couple hour or so from North Carolina. You know, prisons they're in the middle of nowhere.
Facts, facts,
They're
facts.
in
So,
the middle of nowhere.
middle of nowhere. So, Commonwealth State, you got locked up in. I
Yeah,
got
yeah,
you. All right,
Commonwealth. Yeah.
all right, all right. And so now we know the stuff that you did while you were inside to start to change your mindset. Now let's fast forward to your release. And upon release, we know you did journaling, so we know you had a map for yourself. How did skincare become, what you wanted to do?
Well, I think it stems from my mother. You know, when I was growing up, my mother used to, excuse me, my mother used to always say, you know, you're a black kid and presentation is key.
Mm,
And before
mm,
you open your mouth, where you grew up, where you live, where your family's from, everyone looks at your skin and teeth.
mm.
So that's the
Right.
first focal point that everyone looks at. They look at you first.
Yep.
That's the first thing. And before you open your mouth, they're looking at you.
Yep.
And so that's always been in the back of my head, the importance of looking and feeling your best.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the whole journalism circuit, I always, used to study men. Again, it goes back from what I learned in prison. Pay attention, right? So I started to really pay attention. I'm like, men are concerned about their body, how they dress, their cars, clothes, and all of those things, right?
Yep.
But what I discovered was men weren't looking after their skin. You can have the
Mm.
best clothes on, you can have the
Mm.
best shoes on, you can have all of those things, but you're not looking after your skin and you're not looking after your teeth. And that
For
doesn't
sure.
matter if you're incarcerated or not. Those are the facts that I've noticed. I keep noticing it.
Yep.
Those are the straight facts. And so I
Yep.
went on this question, this journey, and I think for me, the one thing that prison taught me, and I would share with the listeners, if you look at that concrete wall every day and you look at that little sliver of window you have in your
Mm.
cell,
Mm.
if you really look at that concrete wall and you look and you look and you look, you can become to see things before they even happen.
Mm.
And so one thing that prison did for me, it allowed me to become a visionary because all I did was
Oof.
dream.
Oof. Oof. Powerful.
All I did was
Powerful.
dream.
Mm. Mm.
So in launching this skincare line, I was way ahead because I was able to dream and see. And that's how I got into the category. And it's been a journey. And we can talk about that as we keep asking questions. But it's been the greatest thing that's ever happened to me because I'm learning more about myself.
That's
I'm
right.
learning more about having resilience,
That's right.
fortitude, um,
Yes.
stick to
Yes.
itiveness,
Yes.
and understanding that, never give up.
That's a fact, bro. That
Never
is a
give up.
fact. That's a
They
fact.
have to kill me before I even get the. They have to.
That's right.
We'll get
That's
done.
right. That's right. Now I love it. And I think you're right. I mean, I think, presentation is key. And, even for our listeners, especially our incarcerated listeners, some of you might be going to court. Some of you might be going in front of parole boards. Some of you guys are going to be getting out and starting to interview for jobs. Keeping in mind that people are always going to judge you by how you look at first. And so it's very important to keep that presentation tight. It's very important to mimic people's looks that you want to be like, their looks, their talks, all of those things. Because, if one person did it, you were able to do it too. And so I just absolutely love that. And I mean, the bar of all bars was I became a visionary because all I did was dream. Like, that is such a bar because anybody who's been incarceration can understand that completely.
Yeah.
And it's important that we never allow prison is made to kind of shatter our dreams.
Yep.
And so it's important to know we can always put our dreams back together, and we're all visionaries because of that experience. So that was powerful, brother.
Thank you.
And so you mentioned, and as an entrepreneur, I know this to be fact, just like you said, entrepreneurship, it really stretches you. It teaches you a lot about yourself. And so, do you mind now sharing some of that journey of how you started the business and, just some of the experiences of how you've been able to become a successful entrepreneur in this space?
Yeah, I think, for me, what allowed me to get this far and do the things that I've done is I focused on building a network.
Mm, mm, mm,
The
mm.
network allows you to drive your business as far as you want it to go.
That's right.
Because we have to understand this, people know people.
Yep.
And if, we're all on this earth to make the next person better, right? It's about a win-win. And so I think for me what happened was I started to ask people who were smarter than myself,
Mm,
what do they think
mm.
about the idea? And you got to understand, I had this idea for such a long time ago, right? And I had to really kind of formulate it, right? And I really had to figure out what I wanted to do with it, right? And I realized that, I am the brand, I am why we're going to be able to drive it, right? But
Yep.
again, I had to keep working on myself because there still was shame with the prison thing. There was still that
Mm,
ego, right? There was still
mm.
all the things that I had to work through to be able to get there, right? Because when you raise money and you do certain things, it's not that people bet on your dream, they bet on you.
That's right. That's right.
And
That's
so
right.
I constantly had to keep working on myself, right? You have to constantly keep working on yourself. And I think that's what's given me this ability to be in this place because I kept working on myself. And then I tapped into my network to do extraordinary things.
Yeah. And so you made mention of network. One thing I always tell people: a wise king seeks counsel. The president doesn't make a decision without talking to their advisors. So I think it's important we all have a board of advisors, individuals that we could talk to, pitch ideas through, talk through situations. But I think it's important that that advisor or those advisory teams are proven in what they do and what they bring to the table, right? And we know how it goes, especially when we sitting when we locked up. Everybody's a master of everything.
Yeah.
They'll tell you how to build an airplane. They used to build airplanes and blah blah blah, right? And so I think it's really important though that you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, like you said, and who are proven.
Yeah.
And my mom will tell you, I'll tell my mom in a heartbeat, I love you to death. I'm gonna hear what you say. But if you haven't done it, I have to seek someone who's done it. And, you know, and I think everyone should take that approach. But go ahead,
No,
Troy.
and I love that because that's what I share with people. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like if you haven't made $1 million, why am I listening to you? And that's your mom, that's your dad, that's your cousin, that's everybody. If you have not
Yep.
done that, why am I listening
Yep.
to you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Couldn't agree more. And so I know some of our listeners are sitting back and they're thinking, yeah, that sounds great, but how do you network? And
Yeah.
so my question to you, what are maybe one or two of your top networking tips that you would give somebody?
Yeah. So the bare minimum, when I was at Farmington Correctional Facility the other day, a guy asked me the same question. How do
Mm-hmm.
you network?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, when I got out of prison, I had no money. And I said, but what my father always told me, he was like, son, opportunities don't exist in a dive bar. You have to go where
Mm,
people have money to
mm,
network.
mm.
So when I got out of prison, I would go to a fancy hotel. I would have a cup of tea because that's the cheapest thing you could get, or you can get a hot water with lemon.
Right?
Like
Talk
you're
that.
drinking coffee, nobody knows you're
Yep.
not drinking coffee.
Yep.
You sit there and allow opportunities to come.
Mm.
Put yourself in the situation. You go to the nicest place in your town, wherever you live,
Love
and you
this.
sit at the bar and you don't have to consume alcohol. If you choose to, you can get the cheapest thing. If you don't have any money, you can get a beer because in most places at a fancy place, the cheapest thing is a beer.
That's right.
And now we have these non-alcoholic drinks, so that's even cheaper too.
It's a fact.
So you
Facts.
sit there, you may have your journal, you may have a pen, you may have a business card, and you just start talking to people and opening your mouth, right? Because when
Yep.
you're in those places, people are looking to meet interesting people and they're
Yep.
looking for opportunity. And that's how
Mm.
you do it. That's how
Mm.
you start right there.
I love that, bro. That's a great jewel right there. And it's simple. Anybody could do it. And
Anybody
you
can do it.
and you know what I love that you said? Put yourself in position for opportunities to find you. And
Yeah.
like you said, if you're not in that room, you miss out on that opportunity. But
Yeah.
just by being in that room, you open yourself up for those opportunities.
It's
Um,
like, I'm sorry,
no,
brother.
go ahead. No, no, no.
It's
Go, go, go.
like how I met you. I
Yes,
went
sir.
I went to TED in
Mm-hmm.
Vancouver 3 years ago, and I would just happen to sit by myself, minding my own business, and I sat right next to Delia,
Yep.
and that's how that happened, and that's how we are right here because I
Yeah.
actually sat next to her. We had a great conversation. We exchanged contacts, and here we are now.
So true, bro. And that's how it happens. And for those who don't know, we got some exciting stuff that we're going to be partnering up on later on this year, just through the network. And so that's literally how it happens by putting yourself there. For anyone who's married or in a relationship, one networking tool that I love is double dates. And so like me and my wife, we made in the last 3 years, we made a dedicated effort just to try to do a double date once a month with other
Wow.
successful people in our network. Because to your point, what you said earlier, Troy, people, they do business, and I find they do business with people they like.
Yes.
And especially as African Americans, uh, in the business community, you're gonna find most people don't actually look like you. And
Yeah.
so you have to create parallels where they can start to identify and see you as they see themselves. And
Yes.
so after we go to dinner, we're talking about our family, our children, what we want for them. Everyone walks away. And one thing is, you might not never remember exactly what was said that night, but you're always gonna remember how you felt when you left.
Mm.
And as long as you left, everyone left feeling good, guess what? The next opportunity that comes across in your line of business, you'll be front of mind for them and they'll be making those direct connections for you. And
Yeah.
so that's my little networking tip that I'll give on top of what Troy said. But it's huge. It's huge that we do that. Now, one thing One of the biggest things, Troy, that I love to harp on, and you mentioned it without saying it, is personal development. What, in your opinion, you mentioned going to events, you mentioned networking, what you mentioned reading, what you mentioned faith. Are there any other things that you would give as a jewel for individuals when it comes to personal development, especially for our incarcerated listeners? Like, what are some things they could definitely incorporate into their lives today to start that they could continue to build on once they're released?
The one thing that I would say for them to do to build on upon their release is the journal.
Mm,
Write your thoughts, write your plans, write your everything that you want to do. That's the first part. Even write how do you feel about yourself.
yeah, yeah,
If you don't like yourself, write how you feel about yourself and why you don't.
yeah. I agree.
Document what's in here.
Mm,
Document what's
mm,
in here. Document it because
mm.
your story could impact and change the world.
Oof,
But if it's
oof,
not written
oof,
down,
oof.
you yourself will forget it as life goes on.
So true.
And
I
so
love
I
it.
would say document how you feel about yourself. And I think
Mm,
that is the first key step. Have that journal. I still have my journals from when I was in prison. I took
mm,
them to Farmington Correctional Center and read a passage out of them from my days when I was in prison.
powerful. Powerful.
And I donated journals to all the men that came to my talk and asked them to write their visions down.
Mm,
Write what you feel. And no matter what, who cares if no one else believes?
that's
You
right.
have to believe.
That's right. That's the most important thing. You got to believe. And, so tell us a little bit now about your company, the products that you actually offer, and a little bit about the skincare game that someone might not know or someone who might be interested of getting into it.
Yeah, so the name of my company used to be Troy Skincare,
Mm-hmm.
and I was going through a trademark issue, and I changed it to something that really is powerful, extraordinary, and it speaks volumes. So the name of the company now is called T363
Yep, I saw that.
Skin. And T363, T is the first initial of my name, Troy,
Mm-hmm.
and 363 is the last three of my prison number.
Ooh,
And skin is our component. And
ooh.
so for me, it speaks volumes.
Mm-hmm.
You understand it matter of fact, you're like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
And I want this to be a brand where it inspires, impacts every man. We're positioning and we're helping ex prisoners, but this is
Mm-hmm.
for every man that they know that they can get off their butt and do something extraordinary with their life. And
Love
I
it.
think that is where we're starting. And it starts with your skin, as we talked about, is
Yep.
presentation.
Yep.
Every man, in my opinion, 2025, we need to get back to men being presentable. We need to get back to men looking sharp. We need to get back to men feeling good about themselves, right? Not
Talk
just
about
going
it.
to the gym, lifting weights, feeling buff. Well, who cares about that?
Mm-hmm.
Let's all get back to looking good.
I love it.
And so the products we're offering, we're starting with a moisturizer, right? Because men understand that word. They've heard that
Mm-hmm.
word a million times. They know what a
Mm-hmm.
moisturizer is.
Yep.
As we continue to build out our model, it's going to be an exfoliant cleanser, it's going to be a serum,
Mm,
it's going to be a lip and nail balm. And then,
mm,
and when I say lip and nail balm, I say that so you can apply the moisture on your lips. And if you are afraid or haven't welcomed into getting the manicure, if you got dry cuticles, you can squeeze a little bit on it and put it on your cuticles.
let's
And
go.
so, because
Okay.
again, it stems back to presentation.
That's right.
People look at people's hands and people think they're not, but they do.
Yes, indeed.
And so that's a part of presentation. And so we're not trying to make men effeminate. No, we're about masculine men, right? But we're about men feeling and looking good because
Mm,
you have to think about the category like this. Back in the 20s, back in the 30s, men looked good.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Black
Took
men,
pride. They took
white
pride.
men, they took
Mm-hmm.
pride. So it's not a color
Mm-hmm.
thing. They took
Mm-hmm.
pride.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere along the line, men stopped taking pride.
Mm, mm.
We need to get back to that pride.
I love that. I definitely love that.
And we're offering another product too, so it'd be a total of 5 products in our collection, and it's going to be an ingrown hair exterminator because there are a lot of men
Ooh,
who struggle with ingrown hair,
those ingrown hairs. That's right. Yep, yep, yep.
and so we will have that, and so that's our offering right there.
I love that. Now, are you? Is it available like in any of the institutions?
That is something that was brought up to me on Thursday at inmate Mark
Hmm.
said, "Have you ever thought about selling in an institution?"
Right.
He said, "That's volume."
Hmm.
And he said, "You will inspire men who are incarcerated because they will
I agree.
understand that you went through this situation
Hmm.
and you are selling product." Because he said, and I remember this very clearly as well. There was no products in there for me to take care of my skin.
Right.
And
Right.
he said that to me on Thursday. He said, "Troy, there are no products in here for us to take care of our skin." He said, "You
Mm-mm.
need to start selling in the Department of Corrections."
I
And he
agree with
said,
him.
"You can scale and it can
Yep.
go global big."
I agree with him, bro. I agree wholeheartedly. I could tell you this: when I was locked up, my skin was the worst it had ever been in my life. Now, some of that I was a teenager when I first got locked up, so a little hormonal. But at the same time, we know how germs spread, and when in those isolated facilities, it's germy, it's nasty, and so I agree, and I also agree. Your core customer, a big portion of your core customers, right there,
Yeah,
black men.
yeah,
And so, and then lastly, the name resonates with those individuals more than anybody because we all like 05A1273. You'll never forget your DIN number. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
Like no matter how long. So I would agree, bro. And now, guys, this is how networking works. Now, if I can help you in any way in New York State, given some of the relationships I have, you let me know and I'll make that happen.
yeah. No,
It's
I really want to. I'm in New York tomorrow to be
okay.
exact. If you're up later around later in the week, maybe we can meet and chat. But
Yep.
I'm talking to my COO, and we're going to try to figure out this roadmap because this was
Yep.
presented to me. You're now telling me this that it can scale and it can be a
Yep.
big thing, and I'm like, I never even thought of that. Right?
Yep.
It never ever came to my visionary mind.
Mm, Well, I'm happy that it is now because I can see it, brother. I can see it. And our people need it, like you said. And that begins to start to condition us to take care of ourselves. I look at my wife, she does her skin routine every day, the moisturizer at night, under the eyes in the morning, and her skin is magnificent. It started to inspire me. I be in there sometimes playing with her products, like, you know what I mean? So, so we really do need it, like for real. So I love that, bro. Now, I know you've had success with fundraising. I know that you mentioned trademarking. For those of individuals who are listening and they too one day want to go on and to explore entrepreneurship, do you have any advice for the person coming home on maybe how to start exploring their entrepreneurial ideas?
You froze for a minute. Can you answer the question again? Ask
So
the
do you
question again.
So, do you have any advice for our individuals who are listening who want to explore entrepreneurship but might not know where to start upon release?
Yeah, I do. You have this time now in prison to figure out what you want to do.
Yes, yes,
Think about what you want to do.
yes.
Most entrepreneurs, every entrepreneur never knew what they were doing. They just kept doing it.
Facts. Yes.
So don't be afraid of what you don't know. Don't be afraid of what society tells you. Figure out what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, read everything about what you want to do. See
Mm-hmm.
who's your competition. See the value of the businesses that you want to do. Read everything you can about that business, about that competition. Read everything
Yes. Yes.
and then do it better.
Let's go. Let's go.
And start working on surrounding yourself with the right people. There are people in prison that could potentially be your business
Yes.
partners. There's people in prison that could potentially be around wealthy people and you know nothing about them.
Yep.
And they could introduce and make introductions because when I was in prison, a lot of the technology and a lot of things I just learned that they can email people from prison. I'm like, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And when I was in there was no email. I'm like, you can
None of that.
email?
None of that, right? Yep.
So you can start networking now while you in prison.
So true, bro. So
And
true.
that's the benefit that they possess now. You can
Yep.
start taking entrepreneur courses in prison when I couldn't do that.
That's a
So
fact.
I had to figure it out myself, but there's so many tools now that these individuals have, which is a blessing.
Yep. Yep.
And so that's where I would start with that. That's exactly where I would start, and I think, to answer your question about fundraising, my fundraising was through my network as I went back to.
Mm. Yes.
My fundraising was through my network, right? And that's how
Right.
I started to raise my money, right?
Yep.
And then one thing that I will share too is don't be afraid to cold call people. Don't be afraid to
Mm.
cold email people.
Mm.
More
Yep.
people are apt to give you advice than to give
Yes,
you
indeed.
money.
Facts.
So don't be
Mm-hmm.
afraid to cold call. I don't care if it's Jeff Bezos. I don't care because I'm speaking from experience. Everyone who's listening, I cold call every day.
With you.
Every day I cold
With
call.
you.
So I'm everything that I'm saying, I do. So
That's
I'm not telling you to do. No, I actually do this.
that's
I get
right.
on my computer. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm cold calling. I'm reaching out. I
Yes,
go
sir.
call people's emails. I try to guess people's emails. You
Yep.
know,
Yep.
if you understand the website part of it, you're like, okay, is it H.P. that, or is it the
Yep.
first initial? I played the game.
Facts.
And it's what I said earlier. My father said, son, you think you know the game, but you don't. Life is a game.
Mm. Facts. You hit everything you said are real shit. Like I do the same shit. To this day, play around with emails, trying to cold call, figure it out. That's why you just got me smiling because that's real facts. Like, and I'm a firm believer of you're gonna miss every single shot you don't take, and in all reality, everything is a numbers game. You only need to hit one time, and that could change your family, your grandchildren's lives. That one time you take that shot, but you're gonna miss 100% of the shots you never take. So be fearless. And my thing is turn the no's into maybes and turn the maybes into a yes. And in the last in the last drill that Troy said is so factual, people are definitely going to be, especially successful people, they're going to be more adamant to give you advice and than the money. And at some points in your life, you feel like you need the money, but you'll start to identify the knowledge, the information shared is actually more valuable than the money in that moment. And so,
Absolutely.
seek all of the mentorship you possibly can and allow it to come however it comes. And, and so I couldn't agree with you more, brother. Now, I always try to keep these our interviews 40-45 minutes, so we're getting close to the finish line here. And you shared such a lot of amazing stuff. But one thing I always like to ask our guests is looking back now at yourself today, if you could go back to that, I think it was around 22-year-old version of yourself and give yourself some advice, knowing that what was ahead of you, what would you tell the 22-year-old Troy?
To love himself.
Mm,
I don't think I loved myself. I don't think I knew what that meant.
mm,
Because if I loved myself, I wouldn't have put myself in harm's way.
so true. Mm, mm, powerful. That is super
And,
powerful.
for me, my new year every year starts January 28th. Because January 28th of 2000 is when I walked out of prison.
Mm,
And I'm coming up on that. So that's my actual new year.
mm,
Doing all the things, that I'm doing for the new year, but that's my actual new year. So I celebrate that year every year. That's my actual new year. January 28th, 2000. I've almost been out of prison 25 years.
yeah, I love that. I love that. That's powerful. That's powerful. And it also tells you for like how it's important to think outside of the box and never follow what the masses are doing. I'm a true believer in that. And little things like that, like you said, I celebrate my new year on the 28th. Let y'all celebrate yours on the 1st. But mine has a special meaning for myself instead of celebrating something that was told me I was supposed to celebrate.
Yeah.
So now that's powerful, bro. I love the mindset, and I think it's no coincidence that you today are a prison boss, someone who's experienced that, was going on to level up and change your life and those lives around you. And so, as a fan of what you're doing. I just want to encourage you to keep it up, keep going. I know that you're going to change so many lives. The impact is going to be felt. I know it's packaged through skincare, and you're offering help and motivation and helping people in that regard. But I also know your words and your actions are also going to inspire and motivate so many others. And so I appreciate you, brother. I appreciate you even coming on the show today, making some time to share some of your jewels with the world. And before we wrap this thing up, please share with everyone, where they could contact you at. Like I said, our listeners do reach out. So, if you want to give them a mailing address, emails where they could actually purchase your products, go ahead and share all of that information.
Yeah. So my email address is Troy at the Troy Troy Alexander ALEXANDER.com.
Mm-hmm.
That's my personal website. You can read about me. If you're on Instagram, my Instagram is on there as well.
Mm-hmm.
But please feel free to email me. Please feel free if you want me to come to your prison and speak.
Right.
I'm here to be of service, and I think together we can do some great things.
We have to agree. And so, guys, one last thing, man. This brother just gave you his personal email. He also, in this same exact interview, told you take your shot. He literally told you that he will try to track someone down and do cold calling and figure out their email to get that opportunity. Yet he just gave you his email freely. So follow up, reach out, support, go out and buy the product, support, make yourself look good. And most importantly, you could, be doing anything with this time. But we here at Prison Bosses, we appreciate you tuning in. And I'm hopeful that today's episode motivates you, inspires you, and lets you know that you could go on and do anything. This incarceration is only a moment in time, and this too shall pass. And so that's my closing remarks. Troy, you want to say anything in closing?
Thank you, Brother Trent. I mean, what you're doing, I would have never thought about doing a podcast called Prison Boss. I think it's so cool. I
Appreciate
think
it.
it's so motivational. I think,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to continue to take this global.
Yep.
I send you nothing but love, blessings, and joy, and wealth and prosperity for your family, because you're on to something very, very big. Continue to love yourself. Continue to just believe in yourself too, because the journey is what you're building. It's just challenging sometimes.
Definitely,
But
definitely.
I'm giving you energy, giving you light, and all the men and women who may be listening, keep believing in yourself.
Mm,
Never stop believing in yourself.
mm,
Get your journal and commissary and start writing your plan. Write it on paper, because it will come to life. If you keep writing and you keep believing, it will come to life. Like, example, I have my cards that I read every day to myself. Every
mm,
day I read to myself, because
mm.
repetition, repetition. And that's what
Yes,
I would challenge everyone to do. Repetition. You're in there all day. Talk to yourself.
yes,
Believe in yourself,
yes.
because it's fucking possible.
That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, Troy Alexander.